All right. Good morning, everybody. It's 5 after, so we'll go ahead and get started with our working group meeting. We've got a full agenda today, so we should probably jump right in. And at the top of our agenda is Jackie with the resolution strategy configuration.
Hi. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit at the end of the last working group meeting, but I think for the most part, I've added an additional alternative. It's the last alternative mentioned in the doc based on Louis' feedback. So I think we can handle most of this discussion asynchronously. I've kind of captured his feedback, and I like his suggestion. It's just adding, like, to summarize it, it's just adding an option to remove our implicit assumption of endpoint health instead add an option for users in zTunnel, via service entry or whatnot, to specify that endpoint shouldn't be assumed healthy, and that zTunnel should handle in its own way with its own heuristic endpoint selection based on healthiness or based on the success of those connections. So I think it generalizes the solution to kind of a bigger problem and a bigger kind of assumption that we make in zTunnel. So I think it's a good alternative. So if folks could give asynchronous feedback, that'd be awesome. But I don't think we need to discuss it today until I can get Louis' thoughts on that updated. And it's the last thing in the document if you want to just go to the bottom. Yeah, it's that one.
Okay.
And then John, I saw your comment, but I've been new for the last few days, so I'll get back. I'll respond to that async. Yeah, that's all I had. I'll reach out to Louis async.
Thanks, Jackie. Right. 1 down, 4 to go. Next up, wildcards. Gustavo, you want to take us away here?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Mitch. So this is another document. I was working with Jackie on this one as well. It's so the idea here is to tackle service entries that contain host names with wildcards, right? We've seen like a couple of issues related to this popping up, and I guess I'll go through the proposal in a very high level, right? And then please, if you want me to step back a bit and any details, please interrupt me, and we can try to get the details. So if you just scroll down, Mitch, please, there should be a flow diagram. So I think it's next session maybe, because there's one that is okay. So this is basically how the whole idea works, right, for service entries, and of course this is particular to ambient mode, right? So there's this specific case we're trying to tackle, which is also for waypoints. So when waypoints are into play, and the whole idea involves using the VIPs, right? Whenever the application tries to reach out for a service in the service entry, and for a host name in the service entry, then we use the VIP to H-bone things to the waypoint, right? In this very particular case here, in this diagram, we have HTTP as an example. So TLS is not into play, but as you can see there, we get the application gets a VIP from zTunnel, right? It will then place the request for that VIP. zTunnel will tunnel that to the waypoints, and then the waypoint will do the resolution, right? So this is specifically for when we have um, multiple hosts that we want to match against the wildcard, right? And the resolution is done at the waypoint. So the waypoint will actually use the host header from the HTTP request, and it will do the resolution. We'll try the resolution for the host in the header. Then we'll get the actual IP, and we'll access the target host. In this particular case here, we're also talking about egress traffic, right? The cases we see where this is needed are things, for example, as storage access in the cloud, right? I think we've had some people with trying to have service entries for, I think it's AWS storage, where you have these multiple subdomains that need to be resolved to all different hosts, and they can't do that at the moment when they're using ambient, right? And yeah, so the document is there. We got some, and thanks John, thanks other people that chipped in already. So we have a couple of comments there, and yeah, we want to initiate a discussion for this. Does anyone have a question? Okay. I'll assume no. So at the moment, we have two, I guess, main problems that we would, it'd be nice if people could give us a hand with this, and they're all related to the Envoy configuration, right? Because in the waypoint, at the moment, we intend to use the dynamic proxy, filters and cluster to get this done. So there's a few details there. So if you just scroll a bit up, Mitch, please. Thank you. So yeah, those two comments there from John. So one of the things is about security. If what we have in the host or the SNI at the waypoint, right? If that's something different from what is actually in the wildcarded host, then we need to account for that. And I'm expecting that we have a Envoy filter for this, right? I'm not fully familiar with how that configuration could be done, but I'm assuming we have a filter that would help us with that, right? And the second thing is when we use HTTP routes as well, how can we use the dynamic proxy cluster to take advantage of HTTP routes when they're in play? And for example, if someone adds a HTTP route coming out of the waypoint, and how we would deal with those. So those are inputs that we're looking for some opinions at the moment.
Could you clarify kind of why and how we're using SNI and why that solves a problem that we're having here? So just clarify why we're using the
so
proxy.
Yeah, so if you scroll down a bit again, Mitch, for me, please. So I guess the main problem there is in ambient. If we look into zTunnel and how it intercepts DNS and how the application does these requests, what happens is zTunnel can't do a DNS request for a wildcard host name, right? So that's not possible. We can't have the access the host information that are in the upper layers of protocols as well. So for example, with zTunnel, there's no way for zTunnel to know what's the actual destination host right, for a certain request. So sorry, Jackie. I guess then if we use service entries and waypoints the way we use today, right? At the waypoint, we would have access to that information. So, either TLS information with the SNI, or if we're doing plain HTTP, we could use the information in the host as well to resolve that target to an actual IP, right? I don't know if that clarifies things. Please let me know if you need more details.
No, I think so. And then I guess how is the problem that we're trying to solve here, different from the sidecar case? Like what's unique in ambient?
Yeah, so the sidecar case, I guess the main thing is the sidecars will have access to that information, right? And let me think a bit. For sidecars, how does it solve at the moment? I think we use do we use the original destination cluster for that? Can anyone confirm that information for me?
Yeah, right now, I think for non-DNS, we sometimes use original destination clusters for wildcard service entries, I believe. Is that the question?
Yeah. And so I think that is, yeah, so when we resolve, so the application resolves the DNS with the cluster's DNS, right? And it would have like oh no, sorry, that's not the case. Sorry. Waypoint. Original destination. Yeah, sorry, folks. I'm struggling a bit here to remember all the details for sidecar mode as well.
No,
But I
that's fine.
believe
I think we could always step back to the questions that have been asked in the doc, and maybe just go ahead and maybe just re-ask those questions to other folks on the call, so we could get more clarity on those questions.
Sure.
So yeah, let's go back to some of those comments.
Where are those at?
Just on the side, those comments.
We can start from the beginning of the document. I think we have a couple of so yeah, Joan was pointing out the way we have the service entries at the moment, right? If you scroll up a bit, Mitch, please, there's a YAML, a blob there. And we're talking about using the resolution type for the service entry. We want to keep as the value as DNS. And John mentioned that there's a concern there because of the explicit meaning, right, for that particular resolution type. And I want to see, what people think about this, because I guess in sidecar mode and, historically as things work, this is pretty tied to the way Envoy does the DNS resolution, right? And we would be using this as well to say that DNS resolution is being done, but it's being done in the waypoint, dynamically. So I would just want to understand where John's coming from here, and what exactly, or what people think about still using DNS here. And of course, if if that's not desirable, we can think of a different API here, or a different value, or a different way to describe the service entry, or how it. Yes, question.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So probably when I said that many times in the past, my concern with anything DNS related interception is that it's relying on DNS being used in insecure mode and applications not using proper, DNS security, and allowing middle modification and all of this stuff. I mean, if someone is using a library, and again, this is not theoretical. There are modern languages don't use libc DNS resolver, and they have more concerns about security, and it's not possible that someone writes an application that it's actually linking in a secure DNS resolver, and it's checking DNS sec, or it's doing DNS validation, or it's using DNS with HTTPS and DOH, dot, whatever variants you want, and that will break everything you are doing in a very unexpected way. And so anything that is modifying DNS records, that don't belong to them. Like http-bin.org, which is someone could validate and get through other means except unsecure UDP with no verification. Hopefully it will break at some point, because people will start using security, take security seriously in libraries and in resolver and so forth. So it has an end date, expiration date, and it will break in unexpected ways, because nobody will know that the library just started to check DNS records and is dropping the hacks that are done on the wire.
Okay, but that's a fundamental thing in zTunnel you're talking about, right? This is something that zTunnel relies on at the moment, and at some point it may break. Like, it's just not specific to this case,
I don't
right?
think zTunnel relies on this. I mean, I don't think zTunnel without DNS interception, it was perfectly fine without DNS interception using the real records. It's just that in some use cases and some situations, we modify. It's not about injecting our own records. I mean, the cluster local .internal. This is about modifying or messing with http-bin.org DNS records. So that's the danger is injecting responses for our own zone is perfectly fine. We may even sign it if we choose to. I mean, we have all kinds of options to do proper DNS, but and it's common. Android and a lot of devices are using one of the secure resolvers out of 4.8s, 4.1s, whatever, and bypassing UDP because it's insecure privacy and so forth. So it's getting more and more common.
Okay.
John, I'm curious if are these the same sentiments that you share? I would be curious. Could you clarify your comments here?
I'm not so concerned necessarily about the idea of having this behavior. Just the way that we're exposing it is like we're clearly, like if we were designing the API from scratch, I don't think we would make it this way. It feels a lot like we're making it this way because there's an API that kind of looks like maybe it does this. I don't know that we should be implicitly doing dynamic forward proxying, which is way different than what resolution DNS means, and it is extremely easy to do in an insecure fashion. Like I commented, I didn't see if there was responses to my comments, but I commented like a bunch of ways that someone could, as written this proposal, have pretty massive security vulnerabilities. So we need to be very cautious about how to do this.
Okay.
It's like an on-demand DNS resolution type. Well, that's overloaded, but something like dynamic DNS would, as an explicit opt-in, would be preferable, is what you're saying.
As like as an alternative resolution, or just something separate entirely?
I don't know.
Okay. I think to me, just from the docs, like kind of the meaning of DNS resolution specifically in the context of service entry is a bit hard to grasp without just looking at the code itself. I mean, I think we reference ambient DNS, but it's not the ambient, I think, that we we need to know today. So I guess, John or Costin, could you like define the intended meaning of DNS resolution here within the context of specifically of service entry?
You mean man in the middle DNS or insecure DNS or hacking DNS, whatever you want to call it, but it's not, it's an abuse of DNS in my view. That's my concern here.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I understand your point there, Costin.
Yeah.
So we're basically returning a record that is not real, or it doesn't really has nothing to do to the authoritative servers upper on the hierarchy. And I do see how that can be a problem for some applications that are using, more secure DNS resolvers. So that does make sense, I guess. And I don't know, Jackie, if I guess the idea here is resolving DNS like this is going to lead us to problems in the future, right? Because I mean, it's not the VIPs or the way we, as Constant mentioned before, it's totally fine when we have like our own domains, or inside our cluster or for external clusters, and we're resolving that into VIPs. That's fine. The problem is for, I guess, for domains that are out of our control here. An application just may think, oh, this is not supposed to be, the results, So yeah. So as Costin's saying there, it's the thing I see here though is if this is.
Is the issue with dynamic forward proxy, or is like, I guess, are we in agreement that we want to add support for wildcard hosts in ambient mode? Like, is like, can we agree? Are we agreeing on that, but just not the usage of dynamic forward proxy or DNS resolution in a service entry? Is that the issue, or is it more fundamentally like whether we want to support this or not, or just we want to be careful of how we support it?
John or Constant want to chip in on that? If I understand what they're saying, I guess it's more about the way we're supporting this.
My personal opinion is that the cleanest way to do this is to have some mechanisms to redirect by range. I mean, all the external IP traffic is redirected unconditionally to an egress gateway, and the egress gateway can do whatever it needs to do, using SNI routing, using other mechanisms that do not rely on DNS interception. Other than that, I'll let John if you have any hacks or something that it's less.
Yeah, but Costin, I think there's two parts. There's one is getting it to the egress gateway, and then is serving it once it's at the egress gateway, right? And so this is only actually solving the second part. So the question really is, do you want to be able to redirect to an Istio egress gateway or only to something else like Squid or?
I mean, this seems like a pretty desirable workflow for most folks, and so to require a third-party solution seems.
I wouldn't say require. Like I think.
Okay.
The main point, I mean, there are two separate problems. One problem is how do we redirect traffic to a egress gateway, and second, how can we make Istio egress gateway work in a cleanest, simplest way for the use case that we want. The first problem can be addressed with CIDR. It's not a hard problem if we accept that all the external IP addresses are VIPs. We cannot use the IP. We cannot use DNS. So we know what is internal IP ranges. We know what is external. We send all external to the egress gateway. How the egress gateway is configured? Istio has plenty of configuration to SNI routing, to do all kinds of things, which happen to be almost the same with Squid and other external gateways. So the user has a choice to use our Istio may use, employee filters may use, we may make it easier to do the routing that we need, but it's a gateway configuration problem, really.
Mhm.
Thank
Sir,
I think I fundamentally disagree with that, to be honest with you. I think this is from a high level perspective, this is a feature parity problem, right? We've talked about wanting to have ambient mesh be the default for Istio at some point in the future. I don't see a reality where we get there with this pretty significant gap in functionality in the project. If it's simple to do in Sidecar, it requires a bunch of extra hops in ambient, that's a non-starter. There's even a user on the GitHub issue who said if ambient doesn't support hard egress, it's dead in the water. Like we have to support this in some way. And so I'm okay with at least it's my perspective. So I'm okay with a slightly different API. I think if ambient, the regular ambient DNS resolution with auto allocation uses resolution DNS, I think it's an awkward API UX experience to have to do something different for wildcard, but I can live with that level of complexity. I think we have to support this. I don't really see an alternative to that. And I think we need to support this natively.
I didn't feel like, I mean, I might have misunderstood Costin, but I didn't think Costin was saying we wouldn't support this. It's just we would avoid using VIPs. Instead, we would just, I don't know, somehow specify if an IP isn't in our internal CIDR range, then we're assuming it's external, so send it to the egress gateway, and from there, just handle the egress gateway problem. Just not make any DNS or make any VIP. Just kind of eliminate the first part of the problem by just doing the CIDR range. At least that was my understanding of what Costin said, not about not supporting this at all.
Well, if you have to change the UX to use CIDRs instead of host names, then we need to, or if you're worried about using DNS, then we need to just, in my opinion, rebuild service entry and ambient from scratch, because it doesn't make sense to have two different experiences for the same API. If the host name has to start at the beginning.
I completely agree with this. As a sidecar, the service entry and a lot of things that were designed with a sidecar model in mind, and they are not necessarily a good fit for a gateway and help for security. I mean, it's pretty much hard to expect that an API designed for a completely different design architecture will work on modified or be the best UX for a better or different design.
I mean, but if you're requiring a waypoint, or / egress gateway, I mean, it's not entirely different. I guess it is different, but it shouldn't be too awkward.
No. I don't think it should be awkward. I mean, it's standard gateway. The waypoint is very clean. I mean, it's a gateway. Just you can use gateway API. You can use, which is pretty much designed for gateways, and you can use configurations that make sense for configuring a gateway.
Yeah, but using service entry here shouldn't be so awkward.
Service entry, it's a pretty big mess. I mean, if you look at the details, I don't know. It served its purpose. I mean, the original intent was something, and then it got extended 20 times, and it's doing a lot of things.
okay.
My fault for a lot of them. Sorry for that.
And okay, so let's say we go for something where zTunnel won't abuse DNS. Let's say that we're, whenever there is external IPs intercepted by zTunnel, we're going to send that using HBone to a waypoint that is going to take care of, external access. Would people be comfortable with, changing the service entry API to that particular case? I mean, what would that look like? Right, go ahead, Keith.
I guess I contest the premise. Like if this proposal is abusing DNS, then the existing support for service entry is also abusing DNS, and so I don't see those. I don't see that as relevant. what's being proposed in the doc, as I read it, is a solution to extend the current support to use for wildcard host names using a feature that is readily accessible in Envoy. We can talk about specifics of exposing the API, but changing the mechanism by which you provide the support does not feel like an in-scope discussion. Like I agree with you, Costin. Like service entry is broken. I actually, if Gateway API comes up with a service entry as sort of that back-end resource, I was talking about this the other day, we should take the opportunity to try to rework how parts service entry work. But I don't see I don't think that's workable today. Service entry as it stands today in Ambient with DNS is GA. It's not going anywhere. So the only options are to extend or start a V2 to add this functionality. And I don't think anybody on the call wants to start a V2 of service entry that's not aligned with what Gateway API might already do. And so it feels like the best way forward here is to extend with what we've always done in Istio, try to clearly document where the limitations or risks might appear, and that users adopt those at their own risk tolerance.
We could have a very, very specific resolution type, fake DNS, I don't know, something very, but yeah, once it's documented, I think it's not very far from the current implementation for service entry.
John, could you speak more to your comment in the chat?
Yeah. So if what this is enabling is the ability for a specific domain with a wildcard, send all the traffic. It does not enable you a mechanism to send all unknown traffic through an egress gateway. I'm not saying it's blocking it necessarily, just wanted to point that out.
Mm-hmm.
I guess so. On the proposal, I guess my question is: it sounds like the only holdups. Well, the only holdup on the between the HTTP routes and the host header resolution type. It sounds like all of that, your concerns on those comments, John, could be alleviated with potentially a different resolution type. Pending a proposal for that, of course, but are there other things I'm missing as far as moving the proposal forward?
No, I have a bunch of comments about how it's there's how the webhook validation doesn't work that we need to solve, how it's completely insecure that we need to solve. I'm not fundamentally against it, but there's a lot of open comments that we still need to address.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood the insecurity part. Like I assumed that was the host header changes or the HTTP route changes.
Maybe I just misunderstood your comment. I did mean like setting a host header. That's not something that is expected.
Was API that was opt-in would potentially alleviate some of those concerns.
No, I mean,
if users
opting into absurdly insecure API, I think is not great. Right.
I guess I'm missing the insecure part, but again, I may have just missed that particular
You
comment.
just send a request that says host header equals localhost, and then request is quit or something, right? This is a server-side request forgery as a feature with no guardrails at all. Right. You can't have a proxy that will just accept anything and then do anything and send anywhere you want with it, right? It's a huge security issue, especially given that the whole point of an egress gateway is to enforce security. At minimum, we should make sure that host header that we're resolving matches the wildcard. Maybe that's sufficient.
I would assume that. I guess I assumed that part.
Yeah. I don't know if there's other issues that are more clever if we just add that match. Maybe there are, maybe they're not. But the bare minimum, we need to have some sort of matching.
But yes, we intend to expand that in the document. How we're going to make sure that the SNI or host will match the wildcard.
And John, that particular concern doesn't apply in sidecar mode because we are routing based on the host header to begin with, without relying on the DNS resolution.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask a quick question? Is this proposal also adding this new capability into sidecar? Well, I know the API is still under the discussion, but the modification to the service entry API to support wildcard for host with DNS resolution, is that also coming to sidecar, or this is specific to ambient?
The original idea here would be specific to ambient. The ideas in the service entry, we're trying to tackle specific cases where the service entry is attached to a waypoint.
But
Okay, but I think user will be confusing because the only difference is the attachment, right? So I'm just thinking loud here because right now, the validation webhook would reject, right? If you're using wildcard host and the DNS resolution, if I understood it correctly. And then in the future, you have to, I mean, if you make the difference, then you have to make the logic to say, hey, if I'm binding to a waypoint, then I'm allowing. If I'm not binding to a waypoint, then I'm not allowing. I mean, just the matrix could be pretty confusing.
I think it might make sense to support like Istio configured, like Istio providing the dynamic forward proxy configuration rather than requiring an envoy filter to do so. It's required when in sidecar mode, when the wildcards, like the actual domains, are served by different servers, you have to apply an envoy filter with a dynamic forward proxy to work around this in sidecar mode. So, I mean, it makes sense to extend this, the functionality we'd be adding in the control plane to also provide this dynamic configuration to sidecars.
Yeah, I think it's a better user experience when they are looking at both.
Yeah, it makes sense to extend the benefits of, not having the benefits of not having to apply an envoy filter and have it configured by the control plane, for you. I think what it comes, I think it just depending on what we pick for kind of what we pick for the API or specifically the DNS resolution part or the resolution type, what we pick there, I think that will have some impact. But in general, the idea of providing this configuration without requiring an envoy filter, that should be definitely, I think that makes sense to extend for both modes and having a UI that kind of represents a consistent behavior between the two modes. I think that would be a better user experience. Again, I don't know what that looks like without knowing exactly what the API will look like now with this feedback.
Okay, so I think I'm hearing that we've got some improvements that we can make in the proposal. I do see that we have a few other items on the agenda. Is there further conversation we need today, or Gustavo, do you have kind of enough to run with this for a week?
I believe so, Mitch. I think there's a couple of things that we can add here to make things clear. Assuming that service entry, of course, is what we're using for this, right? So it'd be nice to have that, to understand if the maintainers are accepting that idea, and if we can go ahead with that. and all of the other details, then we can try to expand those in the document and bring up a second discussion.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll come back to the agenda here. I'm going to throw mine out just as a PSA. I'm looking for TOC approval on the ambient beta checklist. We've talked about that for, I think, the last 3 weeks, but I've not actually seen any feedback from TOC on what needs to change or whether it can be approved. So if you all could click in there, have a look, and either leave comments to ask for changes or approvals, that'll be great. And then we can check that off and move on to Jasek's conversation around default webhooks.
Hello, can I share my screen? Oh,
Sure, go for it.
I will not share. You can show it. So, okay, I have a fairly simple feature request. Actually, I've noticed that we have Istio doesn't have feature parity between Helm install and Istio CTL install. Wait a second, because sorry.
Yes, I think
Yeah,
we
so,
lost you for the last 30 seconds or so.
can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. So, okay, I will continue. So, users who are using Helm can have more flexibility in installing default webhooks for validation and mutation, especially in multi-tenant deployments which rely on revisions. And you can't do that with Istio CTL because Istio CTL relies on the default Helm chart, which is not published as a Helm chart. It's used only internally by Istio CTL. And you can achieve. Sorry, my kid is talking to me. Wait a second. Sorry for that. I am alone with my kid, and he's talking to me. Okay. So you can't when you're using Istio CTL, you can't skip default validation and mutation webhook. You can skip them. There's an option to fix it by fixing default revision, but it's more complicated, and it also controls both. But at the end, it also applies the default Helm chart, which is used only internally by Istio CTL. Yeah. So my idea is to, if you can scroll down, can you scroll down?
Yep. Give me a second here.
Thank you very much. So I would like to add an option to control these these webhooks, both validating and mutating, because I can imagine that some users may want to disable both. Actually, our users don't use the default webhook for validation, but as Keith mentioned in another pull request, which I made in the past, he correctly noticed that in some cases, users may lose validation for resources which were applied to wrong namespaces, and then they will not receive any information from the API server. That doesn't make sense. So having default validation webhook in some cases makes sense, and but sometimes not. It really depends on specific scenarios. So I would like to give users more flexibility in this installation. And since the default Helm chart is not published together with other Helm charts, I suggest to add the option default webhooks, not putting this under values because it's not the Helm chart. So that will be confusing. And I am interested in your feedback, what do you think, and
Thanks, Jacek. I think I understand the problem that you're facing. I think you've done a good job explaining that here. In this case, these new settings that you're proposing would be added both to the operator and the Helm chart. Yes?
No, not to the Helm chart, because in the Helm chart that helm chart is not published, so there's nothing to add. It's only used by Istio CTL, so this is why it's directly under spec, because it doesn't apply to the official helm charts, right? Do you understand what I mean? If you go to manifest, you will find the default helm chart, but it's not published. If I pull Istio helm repo, there's no default helm chart, right?
Interesting. I had not remembered that. Does anyone recall why we are using the default helm chart with the operator, but not with not a normal helm?
I don't know. I don't know the context of that chart. Actually, it duplicates the validation webhook from the base helm chart, and it has slightly different mutating webhook. I think it's called default tag.
Okay, so that sounds like overall it merits some investigation.
John, please
I'm
go
a
ahead.
bit confused. Why can't you do, like, you showed helm commands. I'm a bit confused why you can't achieve the same thing with Istio Cuddle today. I'm likely just not understanding it. This stuff is very complicated and probably not how it should be, but I mean, people install revisions all the time with Istio Cuddle, right? So where's the gap?
Generally, we might change the logic of Istio CTL. Currently, it doesn't honor default revision, empty default revision, which is used by the helm chart, by the base helm chart to control default revision webhook. But now both webhooks depend on the same conditions, and Istio CTL doesn't perform the same. Simply use the same conditions to apply and manage both.
So
And
this is
I
a desired end goal, right? Is that we have 2 per revision validation webhooks and then 1 default one?
Yes, and also the mutating webhook for the default, not default revision, but default tag. Yeah, and I was trying to fix that, but I was concerned about complexity of Istio CTL. This feature is what I request will be used only by users who need multi-tenancy, which is not currently, it's experimental, right? So if we introduce new API to control these things, I feel it's safer. I wouldn't like to affect existing users by fixing the default revision.
Can you explain what you mean by multi-tenancy, Jacek?
Can I say it again?
Can you explain how this is related to multi-tenancy?
Okay, so in general, if you have single tenant with multiple revisions, you will usually, or always, or even always, you will always need default validator and default mutation webhook, because in the end, it's the same tenant. So if you make a mistake and you apply wrong revision, the worst thing is you just connect to wrong control plane during the upgrade, right? But in multi-tenancy, it's very complicated. It may be problematic for some users. Wait a second. It might be very problematic because you might get wrong sidecar injected if both tenants have different root certificates, and that will be undesired. So this is very important to have that in multi-tenant use cases.
So are all of your tenants share the same default revision? I assume no. So each has their own default revision for mutating.
what I want to do is actually you can't do default validator for each revision. It's not possible. So I assume that users either have the default validator and or not at all. And
Okay, so it's all of the tenants share one single default, and then each tenant have the option to override. Is that the scenario in yours?
yes, but I want to emphasize that if it comes to mutation and sidecar injection, you don't want to have, not you, but I don't want to have the default injection webhook. This is super important to have the ability to not create that default sidecar injector, you know.
Yeah, I just tried this out on Easter Cuddle, and if I am understanding your goal right, it seemed to work fine for me. If it's at the bottom of this GitHub issue, if you refresh, I posted a comment just because then I can get formatting.
Okay,
I probably just did it wrong. Like maybe, but is this what you were trying to do? Is this what's expected, or?
Yeah. Okay. This is if it comes to validations, that's okay. This is supported, but you can't skip the mutation webhook.
I don't have any mutation. I don't have a default mutating webhook either. I have just the two of them, just like you had in the Helm example.
Okay, that's really weird. Okay, I will try it.
John,
I don't know.
Sure?
I'd like to be.
I think
I'm
this is
positive.
related to a bug fix.
Like it may be, this is 1.26.1. Maybe it's a bug, and maybe it's the bug's been fixed, and then now it will no longer do it.
Yes, that's the bug. Yeah, this is that was fixed in 1.27. Sorry, now I recall. Yeah, it was broken in 1.23,
okay.
and then it was restored in 1.27.
Okay, let me try it again with 1.7.
So I think, Jacek, if I'm understanding correctly, I think what you're wanting is to essentially have a new thing that just describes the default validation revision. And you don't want it to have any impact on mutation, but you want to be able to point to a thing across all tenants, or you want to point to a thing that does validation across all tenants, but each individual tenant can have a different sort of default for sidecar injection. Is that a correct summary?
Yes. In general, I can imagine that users use different Istio operator resource to manage the common resources, which are, I mean, cluster scoped resources like mutation and validation webhooks, and control planes just disable validating webhooks to not manage them at all, because default things shouldn't be managed by tenants, right? So yeah, this is what I want to achieve.
Okay. So if you have a sort of top level default validator, and then each individual tenant does not control the validation level, that should probably give you what you want. The problem is, if what I understand what you're saying correctly, is in Istio CTL, you cannot opt out of creating the default revision. You can't not create the default validator.
Yes, I managed to fix it, but then initially I thought this is because ignoring default revision value applies to base Helm chart. But then I figured out that there is that default Helm chart, which you cannot control it. Just look at its template, and there is no condition. It's just applied. And as I said, we might try to control it by default revision field, but as I said, I think it's risky, and I wouldn't like to break someone's deployment just because of multi-tenancy, right? I just, my motivation is to reduce risk on existing deployments. That's
Jessica,
if you
just
think it's better.
as a side note, can you share that bug fix that you referred to that went in on 127?
Yeah. You mean my backfix or the backfix which fixed what John showed?
Yeah, the bug fix that changed behavior on 127.
Okay. Wait a second. I can show. I can find it quickly.
I think we're running close to time here. I think my high level feedback is that it seems like part of what you're wanting. Well, let me back up. I think in general, what you're asking for is a backwards compatible way to be able to, in the default chart, not create the default validator. And so if that's the case, I think we can probably come up with something to do that. And I like your proposal for doing that. If it goes, I think any more than that sounds like a new thing beyond a default revision or a default tag, and I'd be very hesitant to add an additional sort of switch in there because it's already gotten confusing between divisions and tags, especially with multi-tenancy support not being for far along. I'd just be hesitant to add anything more than that. But if it's something as simple as something that tells the default chart, don't create the default validator if this new field is set, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too.
Okay, so I will summarize in this feature request what I tried to do and why I decided that it's risky. Okay, and I will mention you in the comment. Mitch, sorry, but I can't find that pull request because GitHub gets stuck when I select author.
That's all right. I think I found it.
Sorry.
Yeah,
And
you
sorry
can
guys for
move to this issue offline when you find it.
yeah, of course.
Okay.
Sorry for this loud made by my son. Sorry, I know it's a little unprofessional, but today.
No, we understood.
Sorry.
Special situation happens. Hey, we're at the top of the hour. I did update the calendar for next week. I think we're going to start the meeting 1 hour earlier to accommodate our European folks and some folks from India. So hopefully it works better for everybody. All right.
All
Thank
right.
you, everybody.
Well, thanks, everybody. We will get to the rest of the agenda next week.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.